From Del Rio, Texas, Rob Wade and Robert Garza. Two guys who dive. This episode of Two Guys Who Dive, recorded Sunday, 15 July 2012, episode 24, Picture Perfect. And here we go again. That's right, folks. I'm alone again. Naturally. Yes, as you can see to my left, once again, I have no co-host for this episode. Really don't know what to tell you other than my co-host was not able to make it this evening. So even though I made best effort to get back from our trip to Balmoral, which we had a fantastic time, we'll be showing some pictures from that under the banner of the current episode title, which is, of course, Picture Perfect. We're going to be talking about underwater photography and some things I'm kind of learning along the way. It's a great if you're into photography at all, in which more people seem to be getting into it to some degree, because we've got smartphones now that have ever increasingly impressive cameras with them. So you find people that are getting more and more enamored of trying to get some really awesome shots with those phones, and I'll touch a little bit on smartphone photography as well. The opportunities for getting some great underwater photography are plentiful because you see a number of your standard above water cameras now that you can get some really nice underwater housings for. I think probably one of the most common cameras, or one of the more common brands that people will look to get cases for, or underwater cases for, are probably the various Canon series. Although you're seeing now some of the really small HD cameras, video cameras, now seeing a lot of cases for. One of the more well-known companies that makes cases for standard above water phones is Light. And interestingly enough, what you'll find is a lot of these really good cases that can handle a lot of pressure, that are easy to maintain, easy to make to seal, so that you're protecting your camera investment from getting ravaged by water when you're diving with them. Can cost more, oftentimes many times more, than the camera itself. So it makes some people maybe balk at the investment, but it is well worth it. If you've seen some of the previous episodes, you may have seen that I talked about the Intova IC10 underwater camera, which comes with its own housing, and you can get a number of different attachments for it, as far as the tray that mounts underneath to hold a strobe or a video light, that kind of thing. But what we have found, my wife and I have found, is as we get more into photography while diving, especially videography, I tend to find more enjoyment personally out of seeing the videos of people underwater as opposed to pictures. Although when you get somebody who does a really good job with the snapshots, it's just really it brings the whole trip back to you in some really sharp images. And we've been diving to a number of places: Curacao, Utila, Cozumel, the Keys, etc. And sometimes we run across people who have really decked out camera setups. I mean, we're talking monster globes for their cameras with with both the video light and a strobe light. For those who don't know the difference, video light is a constant on. You turn it on for actual filming or recording via video, as opposed to strobe, which you're probably more familiar with when you take the camera. That's the flash. The strobe is an attachment that augments the ability of the flash in your camera to light up the area, light up the image that you're trying to take a snapshot of. So we've been to a number of places and run into a number of folks who are seriously into photography. We're talking thousands of dollars they've invested in the gear for taking pictures, and I try to pick their brain. Of course, I've only just gotten into video underwater photography and videography, so I'm really a newbie in the truest fashion of the word when it comes to talking about actually executing underwater photography. And you kind of like anybody taking pictures above ground, on the surface, with a point and shoot camera. That's been my experience. My wife gets a little bit more into photography than I do. She's got a nicer camera that she uses for taking shots, but I'm finding that in order to get the best out of any camera, you need to learn some of the basics about photography. We're talking about the ISO settings, the exposure value, white balancing, lighting of the image, how to use flash, when to use flash. There's so many aspects to it. I'm finding that with the camera that I use for underwater photography and videography now, I'm finding the limitations, because there are things that I'm starting to understand that I need to change or I need to tweak that can mean the difference between a really good photograph and just one that's meh. Okay, I captured the moment, but that's about all you can say of it about it. And then because the Intova IC10 that I use has built-in video capability. It's not HD. It just does standard what they call VGA recording, which again is good. It's better than nothing. You've seen some of the videos I've taken, but now that I see what can be done, and for a fairly reasonable price, you can actually get some really good equipment that does a nice job. And I'll be talking a little about one that we're going to be investing in this year to augment our ability and to expand our opportunities to really get some good photography, good pictures, good videos to share, not just with my wife and I, but our friends, but also, of course, that I can bring to the podcast, because one of the reasons that hopefully you see the show is to have opportunity to kind of see some of the places that we dive and maybe live a little bit vicariously through what we're doing, and maybe possibly get drawn into to doing diving yourself. And of course, we have ample opportunities to introduce you to the world. As a matter of fact, part of our trip this weekend, I was able to execute a little bit of a Discover Scuba camp with some of our friends who are not divers but have been interested in it. And the neat thing about a Discover Scuba opportunity is it lets you experience on a very, very superficial level the thrill, I consider it a thrill, of diving, and to see if it's something for you, because quite frankly, diving isn't for everybody. They see it on TV, they see their friends do it, and maybe that kind of excites them to try it out, but then they find that maybe certain aspects of diving are not what they were hoping, or not what they were expecting, or they may have some sort of a psychological block towards certain aspects of it. I mean, let's be honest, getting your whole body underwater and breathing through this thing in your mouth, and your entire world is what you can see through a mask, an underwater mask, can be a little disconcerting. especially when you realize, one of the most important aspects of diving is you can't just bolt to the surface. You can cause yourself some serious injury. So when you realize, if you get down any decent depth at all in water and you realize, if I panic, I can't just scream to the surface. And so that alone can put people off of potentially pursuing this as a hobby, or even a career if you're into some of the careers that require scuba diving as part of it. Oceanographers, those kind of things. So it's important to kind of take advantage if you get to connect with somebody or some group that's doing a Discover Scuba event to check it out, because it will give you a pretty good idea if that's going to be something for you. So I got an opportunity to execute a little bit of a Discover Scuba camp this weekend. It was more a recreational trip for those of us who are divers, but it still was a lot of fun for those who got to try scuba out for the first time. Hopefully this will entice them to kind of think about what their experience was like. And I might even have one of them come on to the podcast in future episodes and kind of share their experience and whether they think they might want to pursue it as a hobby. But anyway, so I got a few pictures of that, and I'll be showing you I've done some tweaking with our camera from what I've learned over the last few weeks about settings for a camera generally, and then how it applies underwater. I'm learning some things about how I can use light to better effect, as well as exposure. That's probably the biggest thing that I've learned so far about photography, especially underwater. So let me go ahead and jump into some of the photographs here. Here we go. Now this is a shot taken by somebody we went diving with. Back in Curacao. And you see how beautiful the shots are. And that's Tara and I. And there's a turtle that we had a shot of. And you see how beautiful the color is, how sharp it is, the lighting. And of course, underwater you lose shades of color. Deeper you go, then you start to lose the reds and so forth. Pretty soon, all you see is blue tinted, and it all just washes into one color. But I love this shot of the turtle. But it's important to know that you have to have not just the right camera, something that's really a decent resolution, etc., but the right lighting for it to bring that color back. But then you also have to consider things, the ISO setting for the speed, as well as how much exposure, because obviously the higher your exposure value, then you are letting more light in. But that also means that you have to make sure the camera is more steady, because the longer the shutter is open, if you will, the more potential there is for anything moving to take you off the mark and become blurry. So if you're wanting to catch something that's moving very fast or catch it very sharp, what you'd ideally want is enough light that you can shorten the exposure time and have a higher speed setting for your film, so that it can take that shot very quickly and get you a great image where it seems to stop in motion, just like you see in this picture here. See if we can advance here. All right. Try to move forward. There we go. Now, here we are, just kind of talking pre-dive on that first day. Whoops, let me back up if I can. It's not letting me go. Let's see, go back here. There we go. All right, there we're talking some of our friends. Those of us who are actually divers, we're kind of getting ready for our first dive as we got there to Balmorhea, kind of discussing what needs to happen, kind of getting ready. Beautiful area. Love diving at Balmorhea. For those of you who have not seen previous podcasts where I'm talking about it. There's a shot of Troy, who has guested on the show before. And his goal for this dive or this weekend was to kind of work on honing some of his skills. But here you can see this is at about 12 feet right here, almost heading closer to the deeper point of Balmorhea, which is 20 feet if you dig a hole, we kind of jokingly say. So here's a shot of Troy. Now I've been working with the exposure settings on the camera, and obviously the deeper you go, as I said, you start losing some of your color. So you can see everything is shifted towards the blue and green at this point. His fins are actually silver and black, but they kind of take on a bluish hue there. But you see the green kind of stands out very well. Now, what I don't have a filter on the camera, but I intend to get that, or get a camera that's capable of filtering in the electronics. I don't know which would be better. I'll need to read up more on that. But here's Tara again, and she's at about 8 feet at this point. Now her alternate regulator, of course, is yellow. This is common, and her tank is yellow, but her the netting, the protective netting on her tank is actually pink. She loves pink, and you can see that it's kind of washing out that color as well. Now again, here's another shot of Troy. And the fish actually, when you get up close to them and where they're lit well, are actually more towards a silverish hue with a little bit of red or blue accenting. And you'll see in some of the other subsequent pictures that they definitely lose some of that coloring. Another shot of Troy. Now, I'm getting pretty good. This is a 10 megapixel camera, by the way. I'm getting pretty good at getting the speed down, because you can see it's a pretty sharp image and he's moving, and a pretty good detail on the bubbles. And that's kind of one of the things I look at to see if I'm getting a pretty sharp focus and a fast shot, because the bubbles obviously are moving fast, and underwater, especially there at Balmorhea where the visibility is really good, the light tends to dance through the bubbles and creates a really beautiful effect, and I like to try to capture that. I could actually stare at bubbles from divers if I hit the right angle. I could just stare at them for a while, because I just think it's so really nice. Here's a shot of one of the dwarf or pygmy catfish. I'm not sure what they call them, but of course surrounded by some of the other smaller fish. Now, the rocks here do have the rocks actually do have moss, etc. on them, but definitely the greenish hue, and the catfish are pretty much a black or dark gray. But there's a lot of algae growing on there, but it still takes on a greener hue than I would like, and I think a filter would probably help that. In this image, I probably could have lightened up the shot. I tried to take no shots with flash during this trip, mostly because it is so shallow and it's pretty well lit, but I wanted to see what the effect was versus adding flash to it. Now, the problem with taking a underwater camera, and just relying on the flash is it can't, in most cases, and I'm talking about the actual case that the camera is in, the flash normally cannot fully hit the field of view that the lens can hit, meaning that there are obstructions in the design of the case that block the flash. And so what you'll get maybe is, in the case of this photo here, you may see a shadowing effect, almost like somebody took their hand and covered maybe the upper left corner or the lower left corner, depending on the camera, of the image, and it's darker. So the flash doesn't fully expose that area, which is, of course, one of the reasons why you have a strobe. Now, if you don't have very clear water and the right angling of the strobe, or strobes, a lot of people will run with dual strobes because it can help light you from two directions and counter shadowing, etc. But because it has to light the image, if you have a lot of particulates in the water, items, algae, whatever, suspended in the water, then you actually can get your image, whatever you're trying to actually take the picture of, blocked by all the particulates that are reflecting back the flash. And so all you see is a bunch of white spots on the screen. Now here we were in a shallower area where there was a little bit more lighting, but it's still deep enough that the hue is towards the blue. And the greenish and brown of the rock is not nearly as vivid. Here's an example of using the flash, and it hits the particulates. You can see right in front of Tara's BC that a lot of the particulates that are in the water are reflected back in the photograph. Here was a pretty good shot. I love getting these shots. I love getting the shots for where all the fish are gathering around. I think I've talked about this before. The fish in Balmorhea are so used to the swimmers, snorkelers, and certainly the scuba divers that, even though the Park Service warns you, don't feed the fish, people do. And so what happens is you come down there and you can do something as simple as snapping your fingers or rubbing your hands together. And if there are any number of fish in your vicinity and they detect that, they'll gather around. They will cluster thinking that you have some food for them because they're so used to it. But so you see in this image, the blue stands out very nicely, but the green tends to have an interesting hue. Tara's fins are a kind of a yellow green, a bright yellow green, and they actually look better underwater, than the camera is actually showing up. Here's another shot of her, different area. I kind of tried a little bit change in the setting, and when I try to lighten it up, unfortunately, it washes everything out. And part of this is an aspect of the quality of the camera itself, because it doesn't seem to have certain consistent qualities, even though you set things a certain way. And so you obviously want to invest in a better camera, which I'll be getting to a little bit later in the podcast. Okay, again, trying to play with the settings and getting more of the fish. They decided that she didn't have much, and so they were starting to dissipate at this point. Another shot of Troy. Again, trying to see if I could get a fast enough speed to catch the way the bubbles were moving. And obviously, since I was focusing on him, the fish that's in near field there to the right of the picture is a little bit blurry and out of focus. I like this shot because it came out pretty detailed given the distance. Very sharp image of the fins, and good color breakdown for the most part, and a good shot of the bubbles. Here's a shot of me. Tara was taking the picture, I think. Yeah. Working with we have an underwater scooter that we were giving a little bit more exercise on this trip. Had a great time with that. Now I'm wearing a Modus BC, which this particular model has a lot of red accents, but you can see the red is starting to disappear because of the frequency, the color frequency loss at this depth. This is at about 18 feet, yeah. And me going upside down. And again, you see the red in Modest is pretty much gone at this point. But this is some good pictures. This got a good shot of the bubbles, so there's some good detail there. Okay, this is really shallow. I was doing a little bit of the Discover Scuba thing. Now, this is where shallower water shows you can get your color, where you can get your color back, which is why getting the adequate lighting at depth is important to bring the color back. If you're not going to use adequate lighting, or if you're not going to lighten up the image, then you need to use filters to bring some of that back. So you can see how bright red now, and this is literally just below the surface. You can see the bright red standing out both in the tank inspection sticker and also on the Modest BC, and then you can see a little bit of the pink tank behind the person I was working with the Discover Scuba on. And here's another good shot, again with the pink tank. You can see it stands out. All the vivid colors with the with his swim trunks. All of the colors look much more natural at this depth. And actually, the visibility was horrible here because there were a lot of kids in the surrounding area swimming and splashing and, of course, kicking up silt from the bottom. That's a pretty true representation of the color of the bottom there, because it's concrete. And because it is so shallow there, it gathers moss and algae, etc. And so that's a pretty true color representation there. Another shot, working with the candidate, with the little student, doing the mask clearing thing. Again, love the color quality on this. Image is about as sharp as you can get, given how cloudy the water was here. Love these shots, though. See, all the colors stand out really nicely. The blue in my Tusa fins is just a vivid color. So given adequate light, even this Intova IC10 does a pretty decent job of taking the shots. You know, like I said, I've learned more about you know, the settings, especially exposure and ISO and white balance over the last couple of weeks, mostly working with, you know, looking up websites talking about underwater photography, but also, you know, with smartphones, because as good as the smartphone cameras are starting to get these days, they, depending on the manufacturer or the carrier or the OS, they may have certain default settings that are general, or they may be the best setting for what most people would use them for. Another good shot. And you can see I've got one of those signal sausages strapped to my BC, and that is it's a faded orange on that outside, because that's the part that typically is getting exposed to the sun. You know, if you were to unfurl it, it would be the deeper orange that typically is recognized. There's another shot of me. Now this is, or no, that's Tara. This is at about 15 feet of water. You can see the pink in her, the netting around her tank, as well as the pink of her alternate air source necklace, the rubber necklace, which is a bright pink, is dulled at this depth. But the detail is very good. Just would have liked to have either had a filter or a strobe to brighten it up. Now, another thing to remember about strobes is, of course, the further away from the subject you are, you lose the strength of the light dissipates. So obviously there's a maximum distance depending on your camera settings, the strobe itself or strobes, that beyond which the usefulness of a strobe is lessened or completely nullified. Now, obviously, there would be no flash or strobe involved in this one, but this is where Troy was trying to practice his hovering, his neutral buoyancy, which was one of the things he wanted to work on this trip. Some previous divers evidently have painstakingly stacked a bunch of rocks to create a little mound or pyramid there. Also, the angle of the sunlight happening or that it's occurring whatever that time of the day is going to change your images too, and that's another aspect to consider. You know, obviously, basic camera rules for lighting, you don't want unless you're trying to go for a silhouette effect, you don't want your lighting to be, your major lighting to be behind the subject. You want it to be in front of the subject. So in this case, it was almost straight overhead, so this was pretty much close to noon. And this is about 10 feet of water. Tara was trying to attract some fish together around. Again, a sharp image, a good shot of the bubbles. You know, they snapped to a pretty good amount of detail. So the camera's focus capability is pretty decent. I could see where if you had a capability for manual focus of a underwater camera, you might be able to do some neat things, but definitely having the no hassle of a camera that does a good job of autofocusing when you do the partial press of the button, as you do with typical point-and-shoot cameras, makes a big difference. Another shot of Troy. He started to collect the fish around him, doing the Pied Piper thing. And again, look at his fins that are silver and black. They definitely take on a bluish hue. Okay, and that pretty much takes us through all the pictures that we had from Balmoral. Oh goodness! I truly am indeed alone again. Yes, I am. And Robert, who is apparently watching the podcast, should be really, really disappointed in himself for not being here. So we'll have to just make sure that we get him here next week. Hopefully he'll be here. But yeah, I'm really disappointed to not have him here, because we can bounce ideas of underwater photography and videography and some of the things that we might get into as a dive buddy team, because there's a lot of opportunities as we dive together that we like to check out places, and if we have the right camera, right lighting, I'd love to get some good shots, but it would take a pretty good team to maybe try and light the area, have some separate lighting going on so that we could reduce the backscatter effect. And so the experience that I had this weekend getting some photographs and video taught me what I don't know, or made me aware of some things I don't know, and solidified some things that I do understand now, but I see where I need to still fill in some gaps as far as knowledge, understanding, etc. To that end, one of the things that I've realized is that we want to upgrade the camera that we're working with. As an absolute entry-level camera, the Intova IC10 or the 12 or 14, I'm not sure which model is out right now, is a decent camera. If you just want to get into it for the first time and kind of cut your teeth on it, It's a good camera because it does the snapshots and pretty high resolution, and it does the video, and it comes with a case, and it's a reasonably priced unit. But if you want to do this at all, where you want to have photographs that are really suitable for sharing, or video that is really suitable for sharing, you need to invest in a little bit better equipment. Which brings me to the commercial for this week. We've done a lot of research, my wife and I, on what we want, and one of the big things that was important is simplicity of the equipment. There are a lot of folks that talk up the how good their camera, how good their casing is, and I've looked at a bunch of them. But one thing that I see is that there's a lot of buttons to push. Even on the Intova, there's a number that you can push to work with that can make photography frustrating if you don't have the patience for it. So one of the key features we were looking for was a camera that would be fairly low maintenance, easy enough to operate as far as configuration, settings, etc., but also have better quality of both video and just the snapshots, the still shots, and that we could probably use standard or have available decent strobe with. And we finally settled on what our next camera is going to be, and that is the SeaLife DC1400 Pro Duo. Now, the beauty of this camera is that it takes some excellent shots as far as stills, but it does HD video, which is one of the things that we're looking for. The operation of the camera itself, they use what they call piano keys, and they're very large keys that even if they're glove friendly is how they phrase it. So even if you're diving with some sort of gloves on, I imagine there's probably a thickness beyond which the operation would be difficult. I could imagine even with the keys on the buttons on this camera that wearing 7mm gloves would probably make it very cumbersome to work the settings. But according to reviews by a number of independent organizations or companies, this unit does a really nice job of both stills and video. And if you get the Pro Duo, as you can see in the image here, it comes with a dual tray, and that's the part that's screwed into the bottom of the camera. Those are called trays. It comes with dual trays, which is why it's a duo, and one tray has a strobe light, which is on the left of the screen there, and then the other tray has the video light, and it looks like that's LED. So if you're doing video, you can turn on the constant on video light and light up your image. Now obviously, and you can see there's flexibility in the arms, so you can work the angle to light your image. Now obviously with either a strobe or a video light coming at you from one side, there's a potential for shadow. So I could see where there'd be a benefit to purchase either additional strobe or additional video light and putting that on the second tray. So if you're concentrating strictly on video, you might want to buy an additional video light and put that on the other tray so you can light from two different angles. You know, you typically will see cameras with their strobes or their video lights spread pretty far out and pointing from different angles to the two different angles. So the image that you're hitting has the best chance of being lit with the least amount of shadow. Same with the strobe. You could buy a spare strobe, and instead of having the video light hooked on there, you could then hook up the second strobe and using angles, etc. for distance. Take some pretty good still shots with reduced backscatter. And you see it comes with a nice little, looks like neoprene lanyard, so you can kind of let go of it and just have it to your side. You don't have to keep it wrestled firmly in hand the whole time. But this is definitely the camera that we've settled on as our next camera. Reasonably priced. It's under $1,000 if you know where to shop. and comes with this setup. You know, obviously, you can get just the base camera, and it's a lot less expensive than that. And they have a version that does have the dual strobes, etc. So, but this is what we want, because I do probably, well, not probably, I definitely do more video recording than I do snapshots. But if I can get the best of both worlds, I think this camera pretty much sets it off. One of the websites we checked out that did a review on it was a video review, and so the video and snapshots that were taken as part of this review were done from some of these SeaLife DC1400 cameras. Some cases they were just doing the video, some cases they just had the strobe, some cases they just went to the camera alone. But I was absolutely amazed at the quality of the images that this camera records, and how easy it is to use. Those piano keys on the back side of it are excellent. It's got a 3-inch LCD, which is about the same size. Actually, I think it's a little bit bigger than the the LCD that your view screen of our Intova IC10. So we're not losing anything as far as ability to see. And you can use standard attachments as far as filters, fisheye lens, that kind of thing. So we definitely recommend the SeaLife DC1400 Pro Duo camera. If you want to graduate up from the basic camera going up to something a little bit more intermediate that has a lot of good qualities without absolutely breaking the bank. So hats off to SeaLife for making a good quality product that's really making waves in the diving arena. Now, I said earlier that I was going to talk a little bit about the smartphone cameras as well. That seems to be an area now that a lot of folks are looking more intensely at. A number of experts, and I tend to agree with this statement, a number of experts have stated that they believe that it won't be too far off before your regular point-and-shoot cameras disappear. And I'd say I have a tendency to agree with that. Let me take a quick drink here. Mountain lighting, it's faux dew. The point-and-shoot cameras are still on the upper crust of consumer brand cameras, if you will. But with the advent of like the camera in the iPhone 4, which most experts are saying is probably the best camera in a smartphone that's available, although some say that the one in the HTC Titan is just as good. It just kind of depends on certain coloration effects that each has. That's a strength to one person or a strength to another. But excuse me, the point is the bar keeps going up for the quality of the camera going into these smartphones. And I think it's important to realize that as they can miniaturize the elements of the camera, which right now they can put some pretty bulky stuff even in as small of a digital camera that you would typically see in an SLR or something you buy at Walmart, whatever. Those are getting smaller and smaller, but they can't quite get them into a smartphone, not without making the smartphones thicker. And obviously that seems to be a big push right now, is getting thinner and thinner phones. If you look at some of the smartphones that have put a little bit more effort into the camera aspect of the device, you'll see a lot of them will be really thin for part of the camera, and then they'll get a little bit wider where the camera is. Because one of the things, obviously, you can't get into a smartphone right now, as thin as they are, is an actual physical zoom. It's all digital if you want to use a zoom. So as a cautionary tale, To those of you who might want to use the zoom on your smartphone, don't. It's not worth it. It really messes up the picture. All it does is try to throw more pixels on something that it simply can't throw pixels at. So it's not a good idea to use the digital zoom. The focus or the zoom that you get, the image that you get with the non-zoom is really the best you can hope for. Anything else is just going to look grainy and horrible. So anyway, smartphones are getting better with their cameras, but there's still some limitations. But what I've learned over the last few weeks is just about any camera in a smartphone can be made to look better if you stop relying on the default settings. I think a lot of the competition or complaints that you see on most of the smartphone cameras stem from people who expect the phone to take a great shot every time straight out of the box. And that's only true if the quality of the lens, the quality of the sensors is top-notch, and the manufacturer or the carrier or the OS itself, whoever is responsible for that last, as it goes out the door configuration, has painstakingly looked at how most of their customer base would typically use the camera feature on the phone to go through each of the settings: the white balance, the exposure value, the ISO settings, a number of, and to whatever degree that they have actually added user definable configuration for the camera. To the degree that they have spent time to seek that average user out and make those settings and save those as the default, so that somebody just bought a brand new phone and they're ready to take their first picture, and it happens to be that's how they're using it in exactly the way that the company releasing the phone has configured it. That's great, but what I'm finding is a lot of times that's not the case. Whoever set those settings coming out of the box put whatever effort that they felt was appropriate. And some applied very little effort, in my opinion, as what I'm seeing from complaints that people make about the cameras on the phones. Even the phone that I use extensively now, the Nokia Lumia 900, has Carl Zeiss optics on it, which are some of the best out there. And Nokia actually had a pretty good reputation for some of the most excellent cameras on their old Symbian phones. But I read a number of complaints of people who really didn't care for the pictures coming out of the camera. And I actually this weekend, one of our friends who went with us on this trip, who's got a Samsung Focus Flash smartphone, which is a Windows-based phone, was not pleased with the pictures that they were getting unless everything was absolutely perfect as far as lighting, etc. So like that perfect time of the day, and the person was starting, the subject was exactly the right angle. Unless those things were in play, they seemed to get really lackluster, mediocre pictures. Now, it's not got the as high resolution camera as what I have in the Lumia, but one of the things I've learned is I've got to get comfortable with getting off of the default settings. If you really want to optimize your photography, even on a smartphone camera, you can get some really good images if you get familiar with some basic settings: the ISO, the exposure value, the white balancing. Those are probably the most helpful settings. Now, one thing I did learn specifically to optimizing shots with the Lumia, and I found out it did help my friend with her Focus Flash, and it would probably help you too if you're having some image issues, is turning on the macro setting. Now, what this does typically for smartphone cameras is it sets it up to be able to catch a lot more detail at a closer range. But it also has an added benefit, apparently, in the types of cameras that are in smartphones, of actually increasing the clarity and sharpness of your pictures even at distance. And so it also can help you with low light settings. Now, a number of people who just use the stock out of the box default settings for the Lumia 900 complained a lot about it takes really horrible pictures in low light. And that's true if you leave it at stock. But if you start to learn about exposure value and turning the macro settings the first thing on, working with the exposure value and the ISO setting, it's amazing how much better the shots come out. I have been extremely pleased with pictures that I can take now with the Lumia 900 compared to even my wife's regular point-and-shoot camera. I'm able to get some shots that rival that. And that's because I'm now getting familiar with those settings. And once I find something that's good for the lighting, etc., of the image I'm taking at 12 o'clock outdoors, I don't accept that. I don't leave that as the default. I don't save those settings and then expect that to be the settings that I'm going to use indoors with just ceiling lights on, taking pictures in a dark corner of the house or something. I'm learning now to quickly go to those settings and kind of move through them. I can't speak to all smartphone cameras, but I know with the Lumia 900, a number of the settings you can see their effect immediately without actually having to save the settings. So if I go into the configuration to work with the exposure value, it shows me, of course, the menu for changing the exposure value, but it also shows me part of the image that I'm taking. So as I toggle through increasing or decreasing exposure value, I immediately see its effect on the image that I'm taking. So I can say, okay, that's the exposure value I want, and then I jump back to the next level, the higher level of settings, and then I'll look at I may change the white balance, or I may change the ISO setting. And then once I've settled on that this is the right clarity, color, etc. that I want, then I'll save those settings, and then I'll go ahead and start taking my shots. It really is getting familiar with and comfortable with how professional photographers work. Now, if you're one of those people that absolutely insists on, you know what, I don't want taking pictures to be, a big effort for me. Well, here's the thing. If you really are expecting at some point to replace your dedicated point-and-shoot camera with the smartphone cameras, I think you're going to have to get over that particular resistance, because the only way you're going to get good images, good video, is to understand some of the basics of photography and videography and learn your camera. Don't just rely on the most basic settings. And this is even true with the applications on there. Learn your device. Your smartphone now becomes more to you than just a phone, more than just a way to access applications, software, games, more than just a camera. It begs you to do more with it. And that's really what Apple and HTC and Microsoft and Samsung, all the people involved in smartphones, they're wanting you to be able to do more with it. They're challenging each other to play the one-upmanship, so that, oh, well, I have a better camera, I have better user settings for this, you can do more with it, etc. Whatever it is, that competition's out there. So you need to learn more about your device to take the best advantage of it. And one of those aspects, of course, is the camera. And as I said before, the competition is growing in the camera arena for smartphones. So if you really want to get the most out of your camera, don't assume that the camera is just bad. I think it's a fairer bet to assume that the default settings were not the best. So I think you can get really excellent photographs and video from just about any of your current smartphones if you're willing to learn how to maximize and optimize the settings for that. That even goes for the iPhone, which of course the iPhone 4 and 4S arguably have the best camera default. I think that part of that is probably because they were maybe more painstaking in finding default settings that really show off the camera. But I think if you are in any way disappointed with certain types of shots with even the iPhone 4 camera, by all means, go ahead and by all means, play with the settings. Learn ISO, learn exposure value, learn white balancing. And I think you'll be amazed at what you can get out of the camera. So don't just immediately blow off the camera that's in your smartphone. You may be able to get a lot more out of it if you can learn some things about it. I know I have, just in a couple of weeks, I've learned a lot about it and been able to dramatically increase my enjoyment of the photographs and video that I'm able to take with both of my Samsung Focus, the original, which already took really good pictures with the default settings. I've been able to optimize it as well as optimize the Lumia 900, which actually has more settings that you can play around with than the Focus did. So again, the title of this episode is Picture Perfect. I've shared with you some of the photographs and some of my thoughts on photography, videography, both underwater and on the surface. And hopefully that's kind of helped you out, maybe spurred you on to try some new things. You maybe have been looking to replace your smartphone just because you want a better camera. Hopefully I've maybe saved you a little bit of money by giving you an opportunity to take a second look at what you can do with your camera. This is also true of your point and shoots. There's a ton of settings that are available in those things too. So even if you think your standard point and shoot camera is lackluster, you may, by educating yourself just a little bit, can improve the quality and therefore your enjoyment of the device. So, well, we're just about at the end of another podcast. We did mention last week that we'd have to change it for this week to Sunday. The plan originally was to come on at 8 o'clock. We got back from our trip a little bit after 7, so I was rushing around to get things ready to get the studio spun up, and then we had this pretty interesting storm just kind of blow up out of nowhere on top of us, so I was kind of cautionary, taking a little bit of precaution to start podcasting in case we were going to lose power. And I actually was afraid at some point that we might lose it during the podcast, but didn't see any lights flickering, no brownouts or anything. So I think we escaped a little bit of lightning and thunder damage at this point because it was pretty rocking here for a short time. So hopefully you were able to catch the podcast. If not, as always, you can catch the replay, download it, or just watch it streaming from YouTube and Vimeo. And you can also check us out on Facebook, Del Rio Dive Club, as well as the website, www.delriodiveclub.com. And just before we close things out today, I want to throw up the Trips Tech and training that we have coming up. Of course, we just finished our July trip, so it's a shame if you weren't able to come because we had a great time. But we're looking forward to our 18 August trip to Balmorhea. It's going to be a great time. Tara and I will be celebrating our 24th anniversary, so we're almost to the quarter-century mark. So we're really looking forward to that, so we'd like to have as many folks tagging along as possible. I cannot stress enough how you need to contact Balmorhea State Park and get your reservations in. They may already be full up, but you might be surprised to get at least a camping spot. So it's definitely worth a try to give them a call or go online. They've somewhat improved their online reservation process too. It needed some help because it was pretty bad. Usually got better response simply calling them. But by all means, we'd love to see you there. You're too late to get involved in the July scuba class, but the next scheduled one we have is the weekend of 23rd through 26th of August. I will likely be putting out, probably next podcast I'll include a September and even an October date. So if you're looking to get certified, we can definitely take care of you there. Also waiting on word from Mike McCarson, who owns the big air cascade system that one of our local dive shops that closed down a couple years ago was using. He's building nearly finished building a new location for the cascade system to go in, so we'll be glad to be able to share with folks that high volume compressed air is going to be available once again in the Del Rio and Val Verde County area. And then also, last but not least, we have our next dive club meeting coming up, 19 July at Rudy's Restaurant. Great food there, nice ambiance. So we'd love to have you there. Even if you're not a diver, don't be shy. Love to have you stop by and talk to us, meet with us, because we have a good time. We enjoy some good food, some good conversation, answer questions, just generally chat about diving related, and technology, just about anything. We're open to pretty much all of it. So that pretty much closes us out for another weekly podcast. Looking forward to having the regular team back together for next weekend, hopefully. And again, we'd love to see you join with us. Jump into the chat room. You can interact with us live during the podcast, and we'd love to have you with us. So until next week, this is Robert Wade, a.k.a. Scubadog, signing off from another episode of Two Guys Who Dive.